Okay, welcome to another edition of the Skull Sessions. This is your host, Henk, and today my guest is Brendan Wright. Is that your name?
Yep, Brandon Wright.
All right. I often screw that up, so I just make sure I get it right. All right, Brandon, so let's think about what's going on with you.
Not a whole lot. I'm a fellow podcaster and first time author. I wrote a book recently, and kind of how we got in touch.
Okay, what's the book?
The book is called Shadows of Cedarville. It is I would say, more of a psychological horror type story, but it's based off of my own personal experience I've had back in 2007. And I used that weird encounter that I had to influence the story. And then because of what I encountered, that's why I started doing my own podcast. And so the story is really almost like, I wouldn't say it's an autobiography, but it's really influenced from like what I do personally. And then like after the first few chapters, I kind of just turned into like a horror story and fictionalized everything. But like the first couple of chapters were more or less stuff that I kind of do. And that's why I was able to write it, because it's like, I know what I'm talking about, just in the sense of this is the stuff that I kind of experience, this is the stuff I've researched into. So I built the lore of the story based off of what I've been digging up from my own personal encounter.
What was the encounter?
Do you want the short version or the long version?
Well, don't give any spoilers if people want to buy your novel, but
Yeah.
just kind of give me something to make people want to purchase it.
This happened in 2007. I used to work third shift at a warehouse, and we got
That's
off
the
work.
start of a great many horror movies.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We got off work a little bit early. Our boss let us leave, I'd say probably an hour and a half to 2 hours early, because if we got all the orders done, she wanted to get out of there. It was our Friday, and she let us leave. So it was about 4:45 in the morning. And I'm driving down the road, and one of my coworkers is in front. He's driving his vehicle, and I see him swerve off the road. And I'm thinking, like, what is this guy doing? And as I get closer to the area, I can see this black shape in the middle of the road walking, and it's really tall, and it's leaning forward, and it's moving very strange. It almost looked like a drunk person wrapped in a big black blanket or a cloak. And the way it moved, it didn't look natural. It was almost like it was glitching in and out. It's strange. And I had to slam on my brakes to try and miss it, and I swerved too. And this thing walks past my window, and I'm pretty sure it bumps into my mirror. But I tried to look up to see it, and I couldn't see the top of it. So it had to have been over 7 feet tall, because whatever I was driving was a 98 Ford Explorer. And I looked online for the height. It's like 67 inches, I think, to the top of the vehicle. Well, this thing was leaning forward almost like an old person would be, like using a walker to try and get around. And it was over a foot taller than my top of my vehicle. So if you think about the size of the vehicle and that leaning forward, if it stood straight up, it had to have been well over 7 feet tall. And then once it got behind the vehicle, I could see, like, I seen it in the headlights. Like, obviously, I couldn't make out details. It was just solid black. I didn't see fur. I didn't see any skin or clothing or anything. I couldn't make out anything. It didn't have arms, and it didn't have a head. That was like the weirdest thing about it. It was literally just a set of legs and a torso. Like, I couldn't make out anything else. I didn't see arms or a head or anything like that. And when it got behind me, it was still being illuminated by the red tail lights. And at this point, I just took off and drove down the road, and my coworker had pulled into a gravel driveway. And I pulled up next to him, and he's freaking out. And can you cuss on here? Do you care?
Oh yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
So what did your coworker see?
Well, that's why I was asking if you can cuss, because I pulled up next to him. He was like, "Did you fucking see that?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What the fuck was it?" I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "It didn't have a fucking head."
Yeah.
I was like, "I don't know, man." I was like, "We have to go back." He's like, "Are you fucking crazy?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess," because like, I want to go back and see what this thing was. And so we drove back, and for anyone that reads my book, the whole first chapter of the book is basically what I'm saying right now. So it's not really a spoiler. It is and it's not, but it's important to know this. We drove back, and there's a big black animal laying across the road, and it looks like a big, long, like extremely big black dog. and it's just laying there. But the way it's laying, its back's facing us, so it's facing the direction that we were originally driving. So whatever was walking in the road, it would have been facing that direction, like it should have been that thing. So it's probably about 50 feet in front of me, roughly, where I park my vehicle, and he stops behind me. And I get out because the way this thing's laying is laying directly across the road, right from the center. So he couldn't really drive on either side of it. And I got out and I start to walk to it, and he cracks his window about just a little bit. He's like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "Well,
You
clearly
do this is setting for a media horror movie.
Yeah. He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, clearly it's a dead dog. I guess a big black dead dog is what it looks like laying in the middle of the road." So I was like, the way my brain's processing it is like, this clearly has to be what we saw walking in the road, which I'm still trying to figure out why a dog would be in the road. I don't know. It's weird. And as I start to get closer to it, it sits up, but it lifts its head up and it turns back. And when it turns back, its eyes are glowing yellow, but our headlights are shining. So I've always wrote that off as basically it's the reflectivity from like the eye shine or whatever from the headlights. Well, this thing growls at me. I'm probably 15 feet from it, and it growls, and I just freeze instantly. I'm like, oh shit, it's not dead. And it's like looking at me, and at this point, it looks like a black German Shepherd, like all solid black. It has like really bushy fur, though, almost like, you know what a chow dog is. You know how they have like the puffy fur? That's how its body's fur looked like.
So like I'm just softer, puffier fur, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just standing there, and I'm watching this thing as it's trying to stand up. Like it gets up on all fours a little bit. It kind of does like a hobble, and then it stands directly up and looks at me on two legs.
Right.
It did not have the stereotypical werewolf, like the hands of a person or any. It literally looked like a dog, but it stood directly up. And when it stood up, I'm 6'3", and it was basically eye to eye with me. Again, I don't know any type of dog that can stand up and look at a person eye to eye. And it stood up for maybe just 2 seconds, just enough to look at me and be like, "Hey, don't fuck with me."
Where was this? Where in the country?
In Indiana.
Okay.
I still live a few miles from where this happened. Like, it's the only time I've ever had anything strange happen. And I'm going to be 40 years old here soon. Like, that's the only time I've had anything strange, like far as weird encounters like that ever happen. But this thing stood up, it looked at me, and it hunches back down, and it goes off to where this deer preserve is. Now, this whole circular area, well, I say circular, it's more rectangular.
Is it more a rural area or more like suburban?
Yes, it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's the closest town is a small town. It's called Peru. It's not very big. And where this happened at was actually by two major highways that actually go through the state. So it's strange. It's not really like rural, but it is. And it's like this area, it's still this way today. It's not as fenced off, but it used to be. They call it X Factor bucks now, but back then I don't remember what it was called. But they used to it's a deer preserve, and they had like really big, it's like a hunting preserve for deer, and they had these big giant racked bucks and stuff out there. And people would come pay money to come hunt these deers because they had all these like the racks on them and everything were like super big compared to most wild deer. So if you paid this guy money, you know you're going to at least land a big old buck.
Like an extravagant trophy, yeah.
Yeah. So this whole area had like an 8-foot fence that went all the way around it, 8 to 10 foot fence. This dog goes off down to the ditch line to this fence, and then I couldn't see where it went. I don't know if it went under the fence, through the fence, over the fence, or what. It was gone. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm walking back to my vehicle. Like, this is crazy. My coworker got out of his vehicle at this point. He walks up to me, and we're basically like, dude, what the hell's going on? Like, this is crazy shit. And as we're talking, I look down on the ground between where him and I are standing. We're just like you'd be if having a conversation with somebody up close. Down on the ground beside of us, like right between our feet, there's a little field mouse. And it's standing on its hind legs too, but it's rubbing its face. Its two front paws are rubbing its face. It's all wet looking. It looks like it's washing itself, cleaning itself. Now, why in the middle of the night in February would a field mouse be out in the middle of the road between two big humans next to two running vehicles, cleaning itself? To me, that's just strange in general. So I was like, I point to the ground, like, you see this shit? And he kind of like does a weird little laugh, and I nudge it with my foot. So the mouse like scoots just a little bit because I pushed it with my foot, but he keeps cleaning itself. It's like it completely in a daze. It wouldn't even like register that I just literally touched a wild mouse, and it doesn't even care. Like he's just more concerned about just wiping his face off and wiping its fur and everything else.
Yeah,
like,
these should take off. Yeah.
This is like the most bizarre shit of the whole thing. Is like the mouse is what creeps me out the most about what just happened because I don't. How do you explain why a wild mouse would just be cool with some human just touching it and not even caring? So at this point, like, all right, man, I'm going home. Like, I'm tired. This is crazy. I'm going home. He went off his way. I went my way. And then the next morning, I woke up and I drew a picture of this dog thing because, again, I'm thinking werewolf because what else would you think of when you see like an upright walking dog?
Were you thinking like a Sasquatch or anything like that?
No, because it was clearly a dog. People said it was a bear. We live in Indiana. We don't have bear here, but we also don't have upright walking canines either, so I don't really know. But I know the difference between a dog and a bear. This had pointy ears on top. Bears don't usually have pointy ears. They have the rounded ears. And I have a German Shepherd. I have an all-white German Shepherd right now. And at the time, there was a German Shepherd at my parents' house. I still lived at home at that point. And I know what a German Shepherd looks like. And it literally had the face of a German Shepherd, but it was just solid black. And like I said, its fur wasn't German Shepherd fur. It was really, really puffy fur. So, I don't know. And it didn't have, like I said, the stereotypical, it didn't have a wolf man body. It didn't look like human. But the way it stood up, it looked like it could walk on its legs naturally. If that makes any sense.
Does the body look kind of like, more animalistic? It didn't look human. Didn't have like a.
It looked more like an actual dog until it stood directly up. When it stood up, you know how like a dog's legs would be like this?
Right.
It didn't do that. Its arms went like this. It went off to its sides. And I don't know of any type of dog that would have the ability to make its arms go off like a human. That to me, that's just where I get hung up at because that doesn't add up.
Right. The joints and all that. Yeah.
So. And I've actually contemplated, like, was this someone in like a friggin' werewolf costume or something? But the fact that it growled at me and you could almost like, you could feel the reverberation of it, like hit your chest almost. Like you could feel the low rumbly growl from this thing. So to me, that was very.
Did you see the eyes?
Its eyes were continuously glowing. Like they were always, because the way I was standing in front of my vehicle. So the headlights are shining at it. And when it was looking at me, its eyes were glowing, but they always looked like, to me, I've always wrote that off as being
reflected light.
Yeah, like from like when you see an animal's eyes reflect from your headlights. That's what I've always said it was. But anyways, I drew this picture, and I'm no artist by any means, but I drew up this little black werewolf-looking dog picture on two legs, and I scanned it, and I put it on some forum. I think it was like Unexplained Mysteries or some forum like that, and someone says, "Oh, that's a Michigan dog man." I was like, "Well, what the hell is a Michigan dog man? Never heard of this before."
Was that a local legend?
Well, yes, but apparently the more I've dug into, there is a worldwide phenomena about dog men. And I can get into that here in a second. But basically, I found all this stuff about dog men, and I went back to work, and I tried to show my coworker the stuff that I'd found about it. And then one of our other coworkers in there, he burst out laughing. "Oh, you ran over a werewolf?" And like making fun and stuff. And this pisses my coworker off, and he pulls me to the side, basically threatens me. So they need to knock the shit off. He's not going to talk about it. He doesn't want people to think we're fucking crazy. And if I keep talking about it, he's just going to deny it because he doesn't want people to. Obviously, he sees how people are going to react, so he doesn't want to even talk about it. So for 15 years, I never even mentioned it anymore because the other person that saw all this crazy stuff won't back me up. So it's like, what are you supposed to do? So I just wrote it off, and my explanation for it doesn't really add up either. But in my mind, because I'm skeptic, like I do a podcast where I interview people about weird encounters and everything now.
What's your podcast called?
It's called Tinfoil Tales.
Okay.
It's what this is up here. You can't really see it, but it's
Oh, we can see it. Yeah.
basically it's we dive into conspiracies and people with paranormal encounters, like if they encounter Sasquatch, Bigfoot, alien abductions, anything like that, anything strange, high strangeness, fringe topics. That's what I dive into. But basically, I never brought it up anymore just because of that whole thing. I was like, I'm not going to tell people what happened because it makes me sound crazy. Because if someone were to tell me what I just told you, I'd look out and be like, the fuck were you smoking? And like, it doesn't add up. But that's the thing. People have said the same thing. Like, clearly you guys were on drugs. I was like, well, I can 100% guarantee you I was not on drugs. And even if I was on drugs, it's really strange that two people would hallucinate and have the same sort of
hallucination.
Yeah. So that doesn't add up. And someone said, oh, you've seen a bear with mange. It's like, where the hell did you come up with mange at? 'Cause never once did I say this thing didn't have fur. Like I said, it had puffy fur, so the mange thing doesn't make any sense. But I wrote it off as this was just a dog that was playing with a mouse. And someone must have ran the dog over, so it broke its front legs. So that's why I was trying to walk on two legs, because its front legs were broken. That's why they're hanging off to the sides when it tried to stand up. And it was just a really big black dog that got hurt. And that's what I said for 15 years. But if you really think about the fact that whatever we encountered first that made us swerve and walk past the vehicle, it was so much bigger than the dog. Whatever was walking, like I said earlier, was over 7 feet tall. And it had really thick, massive, thick legs. When the dog thing stood up, it was proportionate for what a dog should be. It didn't have really big, thick legs or anything. It had like normal dog-sized legs. It just was just a bigger dog, like tall and everything. So I don't think whatever the first thing was the dog walking. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't the same thing, as in it could have been, this whole thing could be, someone said a shapeshifter. I'm skeptical. I don't know if those things exist, whatever. But someone said the first thing we encountered was trying to manifest into a shape. It turned into the dog. The dog ran off and then turned into this mouse. I was like, I mean, is that possible? I have no idea. I don't necessarily believe in this type of stuff, but
well, I think this is kind of what Joe Rogan thinks too, because he had that show where it's like he investigates everything, and you know, there are conspiracy theories out there. There are weird, strange things out there, but most people are full of shit. So, like, you know, kind of like the default most people fall to is like, oh, it must be bullshit. Yeah. But, you know, not necessarily, because there is some stuff that's real, so you can't write everything off.
Yeah. And I started listening into these other podcasts, and one of the ones I was listening to, someone brought up, this all happened during lockdown era. I'm not a podcaster. I didn't listen to podcasts. I'm a metal person. Like, I've done metal vocals for 20 plus years. Like, this is that's why I have stuff to even record with, is like, this is all my stuff from when I recorded metal vocals. And since the band stuff kind of went kaput down during lockdown, I was like, well, I'm going to start a podcast. I was like, I want to start a conspiracy podcast. So I came up with the name Tinfoil Tales, because like tinfoil hat, I'm going to start going down these rabbit holes. And the podcast turned into not exactly that. Like, the first episode we talked about weather control, and then the next one I interviewed someone that saw a dog man. And then it's just it's progressed more into me having these people interviewing with their strange encounters and stuff, paranormal experiences. And while I've been doing the podcast, I still never talked about what happened to me, because I was like, I mean, I'm not saying what these people are telling me is not true, but I'm still a little skeptical about it. But at the same time, like, how am I supposed to tell someone, well, I don't believe what you're saying, when I have a story myself that doesn't make any sense to me, and I question my own self because it doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. But
well, I remember Joe Rogan interviewed one guy, and like he was saying, like, he takes you place and aliens come and meet you and all this stuff. And at the end of it, the guy goes, "You believe me, right?" And Joe goes, "I believe that you believe."
Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been saying to a lot of people. I almost guarantee about 90-something% of the people I interviewed, they 100% believe what they're telling me. but that doesn't mean what they're telling me is 100% true in the sense of it's true to them.
Right.
But it doesn't mean their version is true. And this isn't something I've used this on other podcasts when people ask me. I'm not specifically saying anything against anyone that I've had on here because I've had people that have alien abductions or whatever, but I think and this is me just generalizing, if aliens came down and they probe your butt, they traveled billions of light years away just to come down here and probe your butt as a little kid, maybe that didn't actually happen. Maybe it wasn't aliens. Maybe something else traumatic happened and your mind manifested aliens to cover up the traumatic event of what really happened.
Your creepy uncle or whatever. Yes. Yeah.
Uncle Creepy came into your room one night and you said it was aliens.
Right.
I see that as more of a possibility. Now, I've not had anyone come on my show and say they've been anally probed by aliens or anything like that. But generalizing, I could see where something traumatic could happen to someone and their mind manifests something different. So that's why I kind of, like I said, I remain skeptical on a lot of the time. I'm not going to prove or disprove anyone that comes on my show. If you want to come on there and talk about experiences, I'm literally a platform for people to come on there and talk about their experiences. I'm not here to prove or disprove anyone. Whatever they want to talk about, that's up to them. If someone wants to come on and feed me a line of shit, cool, you came on a podcast and told me a line of crap. Congratulations, you're not famous because I'm not famous. So it's I don't see the point of why someone would want to do that. But there are people like that, I guess.
It's hard to write stuff off. I've had weird experiences. I haven't seen anything, but I've had weird, what would be described as ghost experiences. But you could also possibly explain it away with other elements. So I can't really tell people you're full of shit because I've had weird experiences. But I don't know about there's some stuff where people will claim they're Anastasia, the Russian princess, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably psychologically troubled.
Yeah, that's where I come up with my own little thing. Now I've had people reach out to me, and I don't try to be an asshole to anyone or anybody like that. If someone wants to come on my show, I'm going to allow them to come on the show. But I've been kind of picky on who I have been and who I haven't been on certain instances because there's been a few people that have messaged me every time something comes out new or something. They've had an experience like this. They've had an experience how can someone have multiple experiences? These things are so hard to prove or disprove anyways. How can someone say, oh, I saw Bigfoot. Oh, I also saw Dogman. And I also saw this ghost come over here. And I also saw a Kentucky Goblin. And I was also abducted by aliens. Really? Of all the people in the world, you've had an experience with every sort of weird encounter possible. So when people like that and they talk about wanting to come on the show, I'll be yeah, we'll get something scheduled, but I've not yet scheduled them because to me, I was they're either manifesting these stories in their head. They really think it's happening, but they're obviously off their rocker a little bit because there's no way they're having every single type of paranormal activity possible happens to this one person.
Right.
So that's where I'm kind of But now, since I've been doing the show, I started researching more into these dogmen things. And strangely enough, that's what this book is about. It's built from my experience. And then the second chapter is the guy's a podcaster. He's interviewing all these people with their experience, building the lore.
It's a fictional tale that you base partially off of your real experiences. Yeah. And then you kind of inflated it off there into a more dramatic, fantastical tale. Yeah.
By chapter 4, they start investigating this made-up woods or whatever, this made-up state forest for these dogmen creatures and whatever, and it just progresses into more like a psychological horror story from there.
Well, I think a lot of authors, especially a lot of good ones, they take a little bit of a portion of their life and they just amplify it.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's 100% a work of fiction, but the first chapter and I'd say the first 2 or 3 chapters are really influenced from what I've done personally. And I've changed some stuff up. Obviously the names aren't the same or this and that, but I used a lot of lore from interviews that I've had with people and other interviews I've listened. basically like these dogmen creatures. They're not anything new. Everyone says, "Oh, they didn't start hearing about dogmen until 1970s." Yes, and
What are they supposedly based off of, or where they come from? Like, is there like a backstory behind them?
yeah, that's what I can tell you. Basically, look back to the ancient Egyptians. One of their gods was Anubis.
Right.
He was a jackal-headed
Was that
humanoid.
the god of the underworld?
Yeah, and he is basically a dog,
Right.
and he's on a human body, but he has a dog head. And then there's been stuff in Japan. There's been stuff throughout Europe. I'm pretty sure the Celtics had something. The Vikings had something. They're all like these werewolf type things. Back in France in the 19, or not the 19, but the 1700s, I think it was, they had the werewolf trials. Like we had Salem witch trials. They had werewolf trials in France. Right. And they were burning people and hanging people because they were being accused of being a werewolf.
Okay.
And
I know that there was like a whole thing with like vampirism, and a lot of it turned out to be like people like they couldn't adjust to sunlight because they're like there's some like defection in their genes or whatever, and so that they kind of helped lead into the legend of like Nosferatu and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I know down in like Louisiana area and stuff, they have like the Rougarou, which is basically a werewolf, but they call them that down there. And obviously Michigan, they had these werewolves and or dogmen or whatever you want to call it. And then in Kentucky, the LBL, the Land Between the Lakes, there's all sorts of reports of these things down through there. I don't know what they are. There's so many different explanations to what it could be. I don't think anyone really knows. Anyone that says they're an expert on anything weird and strange, like Bigfoot, dogmen, any type of cryptids or anything like that, I tell people, like, if someone tells us that they're an expert and they have all the answers, turn around and walk the other direction because they're full of shit.
Right.
Because these things aren't even be able to be proved to be existing, yet how can someone be an expert in something that's got no physical proof to exist? To me, that's just bullshit.
Right.
But
so what made you want to translate this into a novel? Because you said you sat on the idea for a while and then you eventually made it into a novel.
To be 100% honest, I wrote the story, or not, but I wrote like my encounter on Reddit. I basically sat on this for so many years, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell it on Reddit. And so I wrote out what happened. People are like, oh, that's really good. They're like saying how creepy it was, this and that. Someone started to lecture me on how I wrote it. They're like, oh, you didn't descript. You wrote this for these minute paragraphs. I still didn't even understand what it's supposed to be. I was like, I'm not even a fucking author. Why are you trying to criticize me? I'm literally explaining what happened to me, and you're giving me all these remarks of how I wrote this.
Like
and I
editor this. Critiques and stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, that's not even what this was about. So I was like, and then it just clicked in my head. I was like, you know what? Fuck this person. I'm going to write a book now. And that's what kind of motivated me to do it. And I'm a hyper fixator. So I started writing this on a Friday, and I had it done by Monday night. So I basically spent all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and most of Monday to write it. And it's only like 150 something pages.
How many words is it?
20, just under 28,000 words.
Okay.
Now,
it's kind of like a novella length.
Yeah, that's like novella. And I will admit since I've wrote the book and I haven't actually sat down and read it, but like I knew there were certain things. I used Microsoft Word and it did spell check or whatever. And then I used Grammarly, and then I used like Chat GPT or whatever to format everything for me. Well, every time it made a suggestion, I just said yes, because I don't know how to write books or anything. But now that I've got it back, it changed a lot of words in it that I didn't know it did. If it made a suggestion, I just said yes. But then it made me sound a lot more intelligent than I actually am. So,
some suggestions will, like, they see this reads a little bit better, but it totally changes the tone. It's like, that's not what I meant to say. So
yeah, it says trepidation all the time. I was like, I know what trepidation is, but I don't use that word. So, but
right.
It uses like fear and trepidation a lot. I was like, man, I said scared. Change it to fear and trepidation. So I was like, well, I mean, it sounds okay, but I won't take credit for being 100% authentic, I guess, as writing it, because I didn't realize it changed everything till after the fact. And then it pissed me off because the first verse, I ordered a version, like my author copy, to look at it. The first couple like sentences, there were spelling errors. I was like, how did it go through 3 different spelling things and still come back being spelled wrong? Exploring was spelled exploding. It didn't have the R in it. And it never come up as being expelled wrong. And exploding is not a word that should even pop up of not being spelled correctly.
Although I've had professional editors that have paid way too much money, edit my work, and they misspell stuff.
Yeah. So it's went through like 4 different revisions since I've had it. And it's been out since September. And I was like, once I got it back, I was like, shit. I don't know anything about writing books. Like, I actually had a book come out earlier this year, but it's not anything that I wrote. I took some of the interviews from the podcast, and I just have the transcripts from it. And I just took the transcripts, and I made like a 10-chapter book from the transcripts. Like, one chapter is like an interview I did with someone from their encounter, and then in the other chapter, someone else's encounter. So it's basically just a text version of the podcast interviews.
And that's a book that's out now?
Yeah, that came out back in January. I've sold like 14 copies of that one. It's like,
what's it entitled?
It's called Tinfoil Tales. It's just the same as the podcast. It's just like I said, the first 10 or so interviews that I had done, I just wanted to have them in written format. So I thought having a book seemed kind of cool. And all I did with that, like I said, I just copied and pasted the transcripts. I had to edit some stuff here and there, but for the most part, it's all whatever was transcribed by the podcast service. It all has like an AI automatically does like a transcript for the audio. So I'm sure there's things in there that doesn't sound correct, but it's like 300 something pages so it's a really thick book. But like I said, this other one's, I literally wrote everything except for apparently whatever the smarter computer technology thought it needed to sound better by adding certain words into it to make me sound more intelligent than what I actually wrote out to be.
Are these up on Amazon? Like if people want to buy them and check them out?
Yeah. Shadows of Cedarville's on Amazon. It's also it's available on other websites. I'll show you here in a second. I'll pull it out. I would recommend getting the Amazon version. The version that's available in other stores, it's upside down. Do you see how it's off? Do you see how it's off-centered?
Yeah.
I don't know why it's off-centered, but it has like artwork on the back and everything. The Amazon one's just black on the back. So this one has extra shit on the back, but the cover's not square. Like it's off-centered and it drives me crazy. So anyone that orders this from like Amazon or some other website, or not Amazon, but like Barnes and Noble, or apparently it's on Target and some other stuff too.
What would you use? Because like people often, they'll have an Amazon version. They'll use like Drafted Digital to like put stuff on Barnes and Nobles and all that. This
was Ingram Spark. That's
okay. Did they give you like a preview?
They did, and it didn't look off centered. Like it was on my computer, so it was like it looked straight.
Right.
So I said, okay, but now they're going to charge me to fix it. And I was like, I'm not paying money to fix it. I was like, because who's really going to order? I just tell everyone to get it off of Amazon. But I've sold 5 copies that I know of. I just got an invoice. 4 were sold in England or the UK, and 1 was sold in Germany. I've made 8 cents off of each book sale. I got 40 cents for overseas book sales. I was like, well, damn, I'm living the high life now. 8 cents a book.
But you'll be the next Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. But basically, the Amazon version, it's actually sold probably close to 150-ish books, which I'm surprised it sold that many, but it's done decently well. It seems like I sell one every couple of days. Like when it first came out, it sold over 100 and something like the first week, which surprised me. I didn't promote it or anything on the podcast because the way I record my episodes, things come out like weeks after I record them because I just have such like a backlog. And I'm just now talking about, you can check out my book on my podcast, but the book's been out for over almost 2 months now. The episodes are just getting to me talking about having a book out. And I don't know how people figured it out, but maybe just because of it being considered a new book in the horror section or something like that, people are just checking it out. But it's sold almost 150 copies so far. So to me, for being a first time actual writer, I was like, hey, I'm not going to complain.
Is it available like paperback and Kindle or?
Yeah, it's in paperback, Kindle. There's also a audio version. Now I don't know if the audio version's correct now or not. I know the version that I had that was out there that got put through. I actually listened to it, and I was like, this doesn't. There's something missing. So I had to get my book out, and I was trying to follow along with the audio. There was like a section that they complete, like 3 or 4 pages that they'd skipped from reading, and then another chapter was completely like missing. I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. So I went back to the guy that did the audio for it, and he's like, oh yeah, it's something I just forgot to paste it in there. He said he corrected it. I re-uploaded it, or he re-uploaded it into the thing for Audible. I tried to listen to it. It claims it's been taken, but the last time I checked, it still wasn't updated. So I don't know how long it's going to take for them to update the correct version, but there's like a chapter completely missing. I was like, that's really derails the whole story if you don't have that chapter in there. It's not a very long chapter, but it's enough to. I really wish
Your fictional book.
Yeah. So the Tinfoil Tales book. I said if anyone wants to hear audio, they can just go listen to the podcast episode. They don't need to have an audio version of the book. But no, Shadows of Cedarville. There's a Kindle paperback, and then there is an audio version. So as of right now, I don't know how many.
With Audible, they send me like readings by a couple different people, so I could like pick one of them, and then it have like a segment of the book. But it's not the whole book, so maybe they missed something.
Yeah. So it ends up being just under 3 hours for the Audible version. And the guy that did it, the voice and everything that was used, it sounds good, but it's like I said, there's certain words that didn't get enunciated correctly. So I asked the guy after it's all said and done, I was like, did you actually speak all this, or did you use like an AI voice generator? Come to find out it's all AI, but it doesn't sound AI until you hear certain words. Like there's a thing that says microphone. It says microphone. I was like, that's strange. Why would it call it a microphone? So there's like certain.
Maybe it's all like the movie They Live, where it's like they're really getting subliminal messages in there.
Yeah. I don't know, his voice though, and then come to find out it wasn't really his voice, but the tone and everything, to me, it just sounded really, really good for the book. So that's why I went with him. And then after it's all said and done, I found out it wasn't really his voice. I was like, well, that sucks, but it still sounds good. So whatever.
Do you have plans for a follow up or anything after this?
Without spoiling the book, I could if I wanted to, but I don't know if I want to do that or not. Just because, like I said, I was inspired to do this when I don't necessarily have inspiration to do something else. I'm not trying to be a writer. I literally just did it because someone pissed me off. So I guess if someone pisses me off, maybe I'll write another book.
Maybe that's the spark that you need.
Yeah.
Like you send out to haters like to Karens, and then all of a sudden now you have to make it a book.
Yeah, but no, I enjoy doing it. I have another idea for something else that I was actually kicking around. I've actually started writing a little bit of it, but I haven't done anything for over a month. I'm just letting it sit. I'm thinking that the next thing I write, I don't want to have it be based off of anything that I know about. I'm gonna try and actually like write something completely different, if that makes any sense. Like I don't want to.
Are you going to keep something? Are you going to keep kind of a supernatural theme, or a horror theme, or a thriller theme?
Yeah, the idea that I have right now, it's more science fiction, but it's based off of actual real phenomena. But the phenomena is really. I have an episode on it. I don't want to say what it is because I don't want someone listening to go into stealing my idea. but the phenomena is not very well known, but it is out there. and I'm just going to write a story based off of this phenomena, but I'm going to turn it into science fiction because a lot of people think has something to do with aliens. So I'm just going to see if it really does. But in the book, I don't like in my mind. I want it to end to where you still don't really know, and that's kind of what I did with Shadows of Cedarville too. Like, I leave it open for someone to interpret it how they want to interpret it.
Right.
I think if someone is able to read a book and they get through and they're like, wait a minute, why did this? I need to go back and read it because this seems like it makes more sense. And you read it again, you're like, now it all makes sense. So that's why I did the way I wrote my first one. And I really wish I wouldn't have published it so quick. I wish I would have sat on it for a little bit. Because I had so many more great ideas after it's been out there. I was like, man, I could have totally did this and did that. So someone's like, oh, you can add that to the second one. I was like, no, because then I'd just be rehashing the first one and just adding extra shit to it. So it's like, I don't know. But no, like I said, this book, if I write another book based off of the ideas that I have right now, I'm going to not get a burr up my ass and try and write it in 4 days. I'm going to sit there and take my time with it, sit on it for a while.
Do you have anybody who's writing style you look at, or anybody that like you kind of took their advice or whatever, and you said, this is what I should do, this should be my approach?
I'm not much of a reader, to be honest. That's why I had to use like the grammar bots and stuff to help me format a book, because the books that I've read, like the Tinfoil Tales book, I used World War Z, the Max Brooks book. That's one of the last books I actually read because I was always a big zombie nerd. And I like how he had his set up, like the interviewer, his questions were like bold style, and like the people that would reply back to him, like there was no real names to the people. Like that's how I actually formatted it, the Tinfoil Tales book. So the interview, like for me, anything I ask a question, it's in bold, and then the person that I'm interviewing, their responses are all just like normal text. So like that's how it's all set up. So Tinfoil Tales is literally set up just like Max Brooks's World War Z book, except his is obviously a fictionalized book, and mine's just based off interviews from people that could have been fiction. I don't know. They told me it wasn't.
Well, his is at least purported to be fictional.
Yeah.
Who knows? But all right, man. Do you have like a Amazon author page, or do you have a website? Like, where can people check out your stuff?
I do have an author's page, so if they look up Brandon Wright, it should be on there. And apparently there's several Brandon Wrights because it says I wrote like 18 books. Like, that's not me. And they listed my books under this other person, so the 2 books out there should be linked to mine now. But if anyone's curious, they can always find me on Amazon. But if you're curious about the podcast, again, it's also called Tinfoil Tales. And if you like to listen to all sorts of topics, I've got stuff on there from some expert about flat Earth, which I don't want to say I'm a flat earther, but if you start going down a flat Earth rabbit hole, you start to question things. Some of the things that they say is like, I start off with like, no, there's no such thing as flat Earth. You guys are crazy. And then they started showing all this stuff, and you watch these videos. I was like, oh shit, I need to stop watching this stuff because I don't want to turn into a flat earther.
How many episodes of your podcast out?
I have recorded over 60, but I think right now there's only 40 something available.
Okay.
I do have
a video thing, or is it an audio thing?
They're audio. There is a YouTube for it as well. I basically have it on all the platforms, but like the YouTube videos are just a static image and it's just all the audio. I don't do like what we're doing right now. And the reason for it is a lot of people are already hesitant to even come on and talk about their experiences anyways. Right. So they don't want to show their face, and I don't want to have to go through all that. So I just keep it all anonymous for the most part. Like I'll say their first name, but we don't give any general information of who they are.
How long are the episodes?
Usually about an hour, roughly.
Okay. All right. So, and if people want to check that out, is there something they should go to, like Spotify or Buzzsprout or something like that?
Tinfoiltales.com will take you to the actual like distribution page for it from my hosting service. And it is on Spotify, it's on Amazon or whatever. Now I will tell people that there is another Tinfoil Tales out there that is not my podcast. It is an Australian podcast that talks about their government. So that is not me. I've had several emails sent to me back in the spring about Australian government topics. I was like, why the hell are people messaging me about Australia? I don't know anything about Australia. I live in Indiana. And I found out that they made a podcast called Tinfoil Tales, too, as an offshoot from another podcast. Well, people were getting the name confused. And at some point in April, I was ranked like 30th something best podcast in Australia. I was like, holy shit, like I'm famous in Australia, but it's not because they're listening to my podcast on purpose. They're trying to find this other one and they're coming across mine instead. So at one point I was pretty high ranked in Australia.
But that might have been a mistake.
Yeah. I don't think they were necessarily looking for my podcast, but hopefully they're still fans of the podcast. It's starting to do pretty well. So I say pretty well, but I don't know what's good and what's bad in the podcast world. For me, I think I'm doing good, but then I hear other people are like, really? I got all that in like a week. I was like, oh, I guess I'm not doing that great.
But, well, I mean, you probably, if you do something that's more like super socially relevant, like hot girls talking about what their experiences strip teasing or something, but no, it sounds like what you're doing is interesting. So, all right. So, if you have anything else to throw out, like promotion wise, like people should check out Tinfoil Tales. Do you have a website? Tinfoil.com? Tinfoiltales.com?
Yeah. Tinfoiltales.com. It'll get you there. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias. Apparently I'm on X too, but I don't ever use that thing. So
are you on TikTok?
No, I probably need to be. I hate social media. I don't have Snapchat. I don't have TikTok. I don't have any of that stuff. I never wanted it. Like, it's one of the, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. In this type of situation, just because of band stuff is why I always had social media in the first place. But I just hate TikTok. I don't know. I hate it. What was the
band? Were you in like one band or a couple different bands?
I've been in a couple different bands. The last band I was in was called To Midas May. We were like a melodic death metal band. I actually have another podcast called Dark Side of the Scene that I host with my friend. And we interview fellow musicians, mostly seems to be more metal band stuff, but we interview everyone from every genre and we talk about all the horror stories that they've had from being touring musicians or trying to start bands and getting screwed over by bandmates or bad venues or managers or whatever. We talk about all that stuff. And then we play some of their music at the end of the episode to try and give them some promotion.
Right. And what's that called?
Dark Side of the Scene.
And episodes come out on a regular basis for that as well?
We just went on hiatus, but we'll be starting up in January again. We had like 45 or 46 episodes that we knocked out. We started up in March this past year and we hammered out an episode. We had 2 episodes a week all summer. And then we're changing the format up. So now every Wednesday night, starting sometime in January, we're going to be doing a live stream interview. So everyone that comes on the show from now on won't be recorded. It'll be live and streamed live on YouTube and other social medias. And then the actual audio from that will be released every Monday. So my thought process was it'll be like what we're doing right now, except everyone will be watching live. So
and they can comment or give you feedback. Yeah.
They can interact with everyone if they want to. I'm just trying to. It started off decent, but basically it's like the music scene. It kind of died off. I was like, we did really well at first, and I think we just oversaturated and everyone stopped listening. So we kind of lost like a lot of the listeners or whatever. So it kind of got discouraging. Like, well, we're going to change the format up. I was like, but we're talking about music and how the scene sucks and why no one supports the scene. And like, no one's listening to the show because we're talking about this. They don't support the scene. Why are they going to support the show that talks about not supporting the scene?
Right.
So it was kind of an oxymoron to an extent, but
right. Like, damn if you do, damn if you don't. Yeah.
But we have fun with it.
So, you have two podcasts, and one's on hiatus, but it's coming back real soon. And you have the Tinfoil Tales out now, and you have your book at Amazon, right?
Yep. So,
and, well, you have two books at Amazon, but one is like transcripts from Tinfoil Tales, and one is like your kind of fictional horror tale, right?
Yep. So, Shadows of Cedarville is based off of actual experiences, not all of mine, but to throw out a little bit more lore for people that are interested. These dogmen creatures, like I mentioned earlier, some people saw Anubis as one of them, all these, like the werewolf trials, this and that. A lot of people think these things are actual, like the old gods, like interdimensional beings and stuff like that. Like they come into our world, they come out of our world. There's like a supernatural thing to them. They're not necessarily flesh and blood.
That kind of seems to be a little bit more modern, like horror, scenario. Like people like more like taking into account like Lovecraft's whole like interdimensional beings and stuff like that. Whereas it used to be like Freddy and Jason and like Frankenstein's monster and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But all right, man. Well, you got anything else to promote?
No, that's all. I pretty much got. Like, people can check out the podcast. They can check out the book if they like. If you do pick up a copy of it, leave me a review. I've only had like 3. I had 2 4 stars and a 5 star. I was like, well, that's better than no stars, I guess.
No, well, definitely. Like, I think any review is good. Like, even if you get a negative review, it's like at least they took the time to read it.
Exactly.
And after you get like a negative review when they're like, "There's cursing in the book," you don't need cursing in the book. So
I will say there is cursing in the book. So if someone asked me from the school if it would be appropriate for the school to read, I was like, probably. They're like, "Is there cursing in it?" I was like, "There's a couple words." So I typed in a word search for "fuck" and it come up like 27 times. I was like, yeah, I said that a lot more than I thought I did.
Yeah, but I mean, it's different reading it than seeing it. Like, I remember being in 4th grade and reading like novels with like sexuality and like all sorts of craziness, and you never be able to see that on TV. But
yeah, I didn't realize I'd cuss that much into it, but like it's all the dialogue from someone else, and if anyone talks to me, I usually talk like a sailor anyway. So it's like it was basically wrote from my own personal perspective. Like when I wrote the book, I was writing it like it's something I visualized doing or whatever. So, and the interactions I have with my friends and stuff like that, the people I talk with, like, to me, it sounds natural. But then after reading it, I'm like, people probably get turned off by it because it doesn't sound natural. Like they don't know me.
Right.
So.
Well, everyone has like different tastes and different things they read. Like, I just in my books, some people will be like, "I hated that part," and other people will be like, "That was my favorite part." So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. But
I didn't write it for anyone but myself. So if people like it, that's cool. If they don't like it, that's cool. Like I did it just because I wanted to have a book. I didn't do it because I wanted the fame or glory from it or whatever. So that's what I say with my music too. Is like I do Cookie Monster vocals. Like I'm a screamer death metal vocalist. Like I don't expect anyone to like what I play or what I do, but if they do, that's awesome. If they hate it, I don't care. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. So the book to me and the podcast is like, these are all just things I enjoy doing. Right. I did the podcast because I wanted to give a platform for someone else to talk about something they're afraid to talk about, because I felt like I couldn't talk about stuff for 15 years. So I was like, maybe other people felt the same way. So to me, it's like therapeutic. It helps me. I feel better about doing it and hearing about other people's stuff. And I feel like hopefully they feel better by talking about some of their stuff. So I see it as maybe a win-win.
Kind of cathartic for everyone involved.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I think we encompass everything there. Thank you very much for being on my podcast. Do you have anything else to shout out?
No, I appreciate you having me on here. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem.